Hey guys, my name is Zack Gallagher. I've been competing at the pro level across the world's biggest kendama competitions over the past decade, and this is how I would do every trick in the Amateur Open trick list for this year's 2024 North American Kendama Open if I were to enter that division. All right guys, so for the first trick, 2-turn lunar, double lunar flip. So with a 2-turn, the grip and the release of the Ken is the most important. So when I do the 2-turn, I first of all am making sure I'm not pulling it from behind me like this. I always want to keep the Ken right in front of me, right next to my waist. And so for this, I'm right-handed, I'm playing a right-handed kendama. I'm turning the Ken sideways so that the small cup is facing me and the string hole is actually coming towards the right, not going out to the left like this. And I'm rotating the Ken sideways to where the small cup is facing me. It's looking straight up at me. My grip with the Ken and Tama is my Tama is out. The string has tension in it. It's not super tight like this, but there's definitely tension in the string. It's not flimsy, it's fully extended, and the angle looks something like this. And finally, the grip that I like to hold in the Ken is a full grip with all my fingers, but it's also very loose. I'm not grasping it like this. There's still some space in between the Ken and the hand right here, but I'm still having a nice grip on it with all my fingers, thumb included. These are where all my fingers are when I'm holding the Ken. Now that we got that sorted, now it's on to the release. And so upon the release, the one thing I pay attention to is how I'm turning the Ken. I don't just let it go like this. If I let it go without putting any motion on it, it's just going to stay straight. I do the slightest turn. I do the slightest little push off with my fingers. It's so slight. It's literally one of these guys. And upon my fingers going to the right, coming off my thumb, that will give you the rotation enough to get the turn to start going. So practice it like this, and if it's turning like so, upon the release, and not staying like this, you got it down. Finally, you want to track the small cup as you release the Ken. So I focus on with the position of it in relation to my body. So when it turns around 180 degrees, when the small cup is directly opposite to me, now the big cup's facing towards my chest, right? When the small cup is directly opposite to me, I then pull up to have a clean, straight 2-turn to lunar. All right, now we got bird, flip over the valley, inward flip back to bird, spike. I think the most popular constraint is gonna be that inward flip back over the valley. And just for both over valleys, you wanna make sure you're bending your knees, of course, using your knees, bending down, and then coming up as you flip it on both flips. Some of you may not be used to doing inward earth turns, whether it be off bird or even off spike. So I would start off just familiarizing yourself with what that really feels like, what it feels like to get an inward earth off. Go for 4 inward earth turns in a row before you start moving on to the next progression. After that, just pull up to small bird, or you can just put the Tama on and practice inward flipping to spike. I like to hold the Ken with a firmer, more stable grip. What this looks like is having my thumb rest under the big cup like so, and having my index finger also resting under the small cup, while all my other fingers closely connected like this. When you can do 3 of these in a row, where you put it on bird or pull up to bird, and you inward flip it to spike, you have that inward rotation down to start going for over the valley. Finally, the over the valley, my number 1 tip for this is to slightly change the angle of the Ken. So when you go flip over the valley, you want to slightly point this Ken outwards, a little away from you, to get that angle for it to come back on bird and sit nicely. 2-tap juggle spike. Now for taps in general, guys, Isaac Turner from Lotus Kendamas has a fantastic in-depth tutorial that I'll link below in the description. And my main tips for taps, guys, is to tap the Ken when it's slightly facing down in either direction, whether it be facing you or away from you on even taps. So at least fully sideways like this, if not slightly under like so. And you definitely want to have either of those options rather than being too early, because this is going to change up the speed and then slow you down for your next taps to come. So really just focus on tapping here and then here. Now I know my form for taps isn't the best, I'll say that right now, I'll be the first to admit that. But the one thing I really focus on when it comes to juggling out of taps is the transition between the swap from the ball to the Ken out of the juggle. And what I mean by that is people will swap like that. Like they'll swap up right as the second tap goes through. And that leaves you no control, no reset to have the ball down and to get you a clean toss up for a clean juggle. It makes things way more chaotic. You're gonna have a lot less success doing a tap juggle trick like this. So you wanna make sure there's a little bit of space in between the two. It's 2 motions. It's like how whirlwind is 2 motions. The flip and the earth turn. I mean the earth turn and then the can flip. But it's like 2 tap, wait, jug, spike. And I don't even have the best form of this either, guys. I have less space between the swap and the tap. If you get more space, there's gonna be more control. So you see how I held onto the ball right after I had that second tap. And that made me have way more control in the toss up and give me a lot more confidence on also the whole control once I caught that Ken cleanly too. And then I'll show someone with fantastic tap swap form what this really looks like. So just a reminder, this is probably not gonna work for you. Well, this, having that space between the last tap and the swap is going to set you up cleanly. All right, switch lighthouse, trade spike. For this one, guys, there's not a lot of other tips I can give than practice, 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 practice. It's like doing your first lighthouse all over again. You're gonna have to really put in the reps on your opposite hand for this to feel really comfortable. One way you can actually progress your feeling of the whole lighthouse in general is putting the lighthouse on the opposite hand and just playing around with the tama. Really just getting used to moving the lighthouse like how you would with your dominant hand to adjust for a trade spike. Because that's what you might have to do on stage. It might not pull up prime every single time. So you're gonna wanna be able to move the tama with comfortability to get into a space that you want, just like how you would with your dominant hand. Experiment with how you pull the Ken up, whether it be giving it a slight turn, so it's already on that sideways position, or just pull straight up as is, and then adjust from there. Do whatever's comfortable for you, try out both ways and see what works. My tip for attempting to have more control on the trade spike is to actually attach your pinky finger at the bottom, have it touch the tama, have all your fingers touch the tama, so you have every resource you have in manipulating its position. And so after you're done adjusting, making sure you have that Ken in your right position that you want it, try moving your ring finger up, putting your pinky on, and see how this affects your control of the trade spike. All right, handle, nod off, handle, spike. The one thing I pay attention to is the angle of which I'm holding the Ken. So I don't actually pull up handle stall like this. I don't pull up to where the Ken is fully sideways, to where the cups are fully perpendicular to the spike and it's just facing, and the cups are facing my body like this. I actually opt for pulling up at a slight angle. See how that Ken is now slanted? This is what feels most comfortable for me, and it feels a lot better for the nod off when I actually get into it than if I were to nod off here at this angle. This just feels more awkward for my hand, and I have less confidence on it. I like to pull it up to where the Ken has a slight angle like this, but I know a lot of other players who actually pull up handle stall for this move like this, where the big cup is actually facing almost completely up to the sky. But this will definitely give you more control in comparison to the first option that we laid out, which was fully sideways. Try all of these options out and see what feels most comfortable for you. A big emphasis for this, guys, is using your knees. So again, like usual on the way down, and transition on the way up. Same thing again, transition on the way up, and then flip spike. And so you can think of the nod off as a very slight roll. So you're not hopping the tama. There's really no secret trick of how to get into that perfect position. You're just rolling it off the stall point. So it's a very little movement. It's very gentle movement. This is where the tama hole should be if you're looking at it from the side, right here on the nod off. Always able to grab that stall point again. See how the tama hole is always in range of the stall point. It's not like this. This is gonna make it so much harder to nod back on, and you're gonna have a very small likelihood of success with this. You're gonna wanna make sure the nod off is very controlled to where it nods off like so, to where it's still in that range of the stall point. It's still the hole still inside of the stall point right here, so you can have a very clean nod back on. Hanging down spike, fast hands. But for this one, guys, I'm gonna focus on the setup real quick. I'm gonna use my opposite hand. I'm right-handed, so I'm using my left hand to help set up the tom in the perfect position. So I like to have the tom in the middle of the cups and parallel to this Ken string hole right here. So what that looks like is this. Nice, even set right here, not low, not lower than the cups themselves, and not kind of floating off like this, not high towards the top of the spike, but in the middle and parallel. And because I'm using my right hand, I'm having the Ken on the right side of the Tama. That's gonna make it for the easiest transition from the hanging position to the down spike fast hand motion. The Ken's just gonna come up right into my hand like this. And after the setup, the execution of this, guys, isn't some big elaborate motion. It's not something where you pull up here and you muster a lot of power. So it's a very subtle flick towards 12 o'clock to get that Tama rotation to come around perfectly and the speed of the entire movement perfect as possible. And what that looks like is different for everybody. People are gonna have different preferences. What I like to do is pull it up at a speed where when I catch the Ken on the down spike, I'm looking at the Tama hole straight in the eye. It's facing me. This is gonna allow for the easiest fast hand possible. What I don't like to do, and this is a harder position to fast hand from, is pull it up and when I catch the Ken, the Tama hole is actually facing away from me. This is gonna be a little harder, to read, a little more effort to fast hand. I wanna make this trick as easy as possible, like I do with every open trick. So do your reps, pull towards 12 o'clock, play around with different speeds and positions, and see if you can get that perfect speed, that perfect pull up to where you pull up the Ken and actually get that Tama hole facing right towards you. Show one more time. All right, gunslinger, toss the lighthouse, in. So my main tip for this, guys, is to actually get the toss from the gunslinger to be as clean as possible. Once I gunslinger, I'm transitioning. My hand is already transitioning to holding it like I would do a regular juggle, towards the bottom of the Ken. Not up here, but actually towards the bottom right down here. And the reason I bring this up is because I know for me, when I first started doing gunslinger, toss the lighthouse, I actually tossed the lighthouse like this. I would pull up slinger, I would have all my fingers fully up into the small cup like this. My thumb would be inside the big cup and I would just go for a toss. And it's gonna be a lot harder to get a clean toss off like that, especially when that's not how you usually juggle to lighthouse in the first place. Most of us, if we're juggling, we're in the AM division, we can juggle, most likely. And we're starting off each juggle like this. We're holding on a looser grip on the Ken. Our hands are lower down here next to the handle. We want to replicate that as best as possible as we exit from the gunslinger and go into that juggle. So focus on slinging and immediately catching the Ken back around lower than you would if you're catching up here like this. Just spend some time holding the Tom in your hand and slinging and catching it with basically your ring finger and pinky. Just stopping it with your ring finger and pinky and spend a couple reps like this. And focus on not trying to, catch it up here, the thumb up here. We like to do gunslinger spikes and, most of us like to fiddle around in our hands and do gunslingers and catch it really, really tightly like this. Have a looser grip, get used to the muscle memory of catching it lower, and then you'll find that transition into the juggle to lighthouse is much easier. Inward stilt, in. So inward stilt, guys, you're really gonna be just focusing on pulling towards that 1, 2 o'clock range. The goal is to get the Ken half turned over like this and also pretty straight on so you can have a clean catch. My main tip for this one, guys, is just the setup. Hold the Ken steady with your offhand right until you go into that pull up. So I'm holding it steady, and right as I actually want to go and do the trick, I let go, and then about less than a second or 1 second later, I just pull straight up again. And once I'm up here on the inward stilt, to be extra safe, guys, you're in an open division, you do not want to miss spike. I kind of like to do, and I like to do this on almost all inward tricks, I almost instinctively give it kind of a side view, because what a lot of players struggle with at first is being blind from the inward position. Practice looking from the side a little bit. I don't mean literally going like this, but I mean just giving your hand a little tilt to the inside of your body so you can see that spike. And it's more of a little bit more of a side view, and that's gonna help the visibility of everything so much. Inward X, over the valley, in. All right, this start is gonna be similar to the inward stilt, but it's much more of a pull straight up motion. We're trying to actually barely rotate the Ken around. For inward stilt, you want to have the Ken turn almost 180 degrees, but for this one, you barely want to have it turn at all. But the straightness factor, how straight you want to have the Ken, remains the same. What I like to do is release it a little bit, like in other tricks. I give it a little tap on the release, and usually just the momentum from me letting go of the Ken to the left is enough to get me that minor spin, have it pull up as straight as possible. So this pull up is almost straight up to the sky, guys. You barely want any rotation on that Ken. And this is my grip for the inward axe. This is my grip if I'm holding it for airplane, but I'm actually moving my wrist around a little bit for the inward axe so that my thumb doesn't get in the way of the Ken. So this is my grip for the inward part of this trick. Next is the over valley. And this one is such a small movement, guys. It's really just a little more movement than regular stilt over the valley itself. As usual, bend the knees, and on the way up, the lightest hop over the valley. The biggest thing here, guys, you can see how my grip actually switched. So before, my inward grip was here, but during the hop, it's very small. I feel like a lot of you guys are probably gonna get the hang of it pretty easily. But the actual grip switch, I'm turning my hand almost 180 degrees. The concept of the grip is the same. You wanna move your fingers out of the way from the handle. So it's inward grip right here, and as I go over valley, you can see how my claw grip has changed to the opposite direction. From here, in, easy visibility of the spike, go to airplane. So focus on the grips. Inward, regular. Inward, regular X. All right, Ken scramble, penguin spike. So I actually hold it like this. My ring finger and pinky finger, these two, are gonna actually be on the front side of the Ken. And I hold this setup with my string hole facing to the left. And I'm right-handed, and if you have a lefty kendama, your string hole will be facing to the right. My ring finger goes up against the Ken like this. My pinky finger actually stays floating, and my middle finger is right under the ring right here. My index finger is in between the ring and the handle, and my thumb is getting support on the opposite side of the index finger. So this is how I'm starting out. The string is fully extended. There's a little tension in my string. I'm not holding it tight like this, but there's a little tension in the string. I'm cocked back with my opposite hand holding the tama, getting ready for that swing, right? Getting ready for the momentum for the swing. And so I let go of the ball, and as I let go of the ball, I start moving my wrist up like this. I just move my wrist up. That's all I'm doing. Move my wrist upwards. And as I drop the ball and I move my wrist up, you're gonna see in slow motion that my thumb comes off the Ken. And it's actually, I'm only doing this movement but with these three fingers primarily, my index, middle, and ring. So drop ball, wrist comes up, I let go with my thumb, and I actually, as soon as the Ken comes fully vertical here, as soon as it comes here in this position, I just actually come out of this grip completely. You're gonna see me drop my grip, and you're gonna see me drop my grip like this, come out of it, and then I can reset for the spike. And this works because the ball's holding it in midair, so I can reset when it's at that halfway point, like here. Right when the ball's fully up, I reset, I come out of this position. I've been holding it with my two fingers this whole time, and right up here, I lob it up kind of, I just let go. And as the ball's coming around again, I go from here to, now I'm holding it here like this in a surrogate position. It's coming back, and I can easily get a penguin spike like so. Do one more time. There it is. All right, guys. All right, lunar, barrel roll, spike. Right off the bat, you can see that I prefer to actually go inward with my barrels. I'm right-handed, I'm going to the left, I'm going to the inside of my body like so. In the long run, learning how to do them towards the inside, pushing the barrel instead of pulling it, allowed me to get straighter flips with multiple rotations that I could actually control down the line when I was going for doubles, triples, and then quads. So for longevity's sake, I recommend learning going into your body, pushing it, instead of going outward. That's what's worked best for me. So we're trying to get as sideways as possible on this, you know, and that means really aiming towards 9 o'clock. But that might not be enough starting out. It's easy to say, hard to do. So to get this flip off as easy as possible, what I like to do for myself is actually change my hand position. So I pull up to lunar like so. I'm actually gonna move my fingers a little bit towards down an angle to the right. I'm rotating everything. So I'm moving my index finger, my middle finger down like this, and I'm moving my thumb up the left side of the thumb like this to really optimize that, you know, that sideways flip. And this really helped at the beginning when learning barrel rolls because they do feel super weird at first. It's not a natural position to flip the Ken to the side. But after that, it's really just practice. I have no doubt that you can learn this fast if you're applying these techniques. Go towards 9 o'clock to the very left. If you're left-handed, to the very right towards 3 o'clock. But really the biggest tip for me is learning to do them by pushing them and also moving my hand like this, just a little bit to give me a more natural feeling position to actually flip from towards the side. Inward lunar, backflip, in. All right, so for inward lunar backflip, the way to progress to this, I would not recommend just going for it, especially if you don't have that much experience with backflips in the first place. If this feels like a very awkward new move for you that you just can't figure out, don't worry, you're gonna feel comfortable in no time with a few regressions. So how I got used to backflips was actually just progressing with different angles. So for this, I put it on small cup lunar like so, and you're gonna get your first taste of a backflip by doing just a little hop over like this. Way easier to track, way easier to land, but it's still encouraging that backflip motion, you know? That's still a quarter of the flip, maybe like a fifth of the flip that you're gonna do in real time, but you're not progressed to that yet. So this is the first variation that I found that you can do that's easiest. Just setting it on that small cup lunar and then hopping it over. Once you can do this 5 out of 10 times, 6 out of 10 times, you're now ready to move on to the next progression, which is same thing from lighthouse. Just pull up to lighthouse and then drop timber lunar like so. And that's just increasing the angle. Again, you're already used to this, you're mastered this, the small angle, and now you're at even a bigger drop for the backflip like this, which is really just a half flip. And if you think about it, you're only another quarter rotation away from a full backflip. So once you can do this one 5 out of 10 times, you've really got that down. Feel free to move on to the final backflip. And at this point, with your foundation that you've set, getting a full backflip won't feel as foreign as you once felt. All right, spike, earth turn, whirlwind, earth turn. I like to see everything that's going on as best as possible during open matches. And I think we all have felt that feeling of missing a regular pull-up spike. So if that's easier for you, 100% do it. I always like to just see it. So when I can see a pull-up spike coming at me, I feel like my chances of success are way higher. Take your time with this one. It's basically 3 tricks in one. You have all the time in the world. Earth turn, pretty simple. You wanna really focus on that. If you're gonna miss any part of this trick, it better be the whirlwind. You don't wanna be going out on an earth turn on this one. So really focus on the earth turn. You would hate to miss this part of the trick. For this entire trick, I recommend just holding it in the grip that you would normally do each trick individually in. What I mean by that is pull spike earth turn, okay? I'm not doing that in an already set up position for a whirlwind like how I would do when I'm jamming, like pull up swing spike, I'm already in the whirlwind position. No, I don't wanna take that risk. I have a lot of time to adjust my grips. I'm holding it like I would do just a regular swing spike, a regular spike. Boom, earth turn. Take your time, this is the hardest part of the trick. Whirlwind, and then you're right back up in that regular earth turn position right here, not whirlwind grip, but up here towards the cups, in that solid grip, and then finishing off with an earth turn. Airplane, 1.5, juggle, spike. So right off the bat, if you're not able to swap to spike like so, or not even that, really just 1.5 trading to cups, right? If you're not comfortably 1.5 trading to big cup, small cup, base cup, this trick is gonna be way harder than it needs to be for you. And if this is you, I would honestly just take the time to just start practicing this part of the trick. You wanna have your swaps solid for the entry towards juggle to spike. If your swap isn't solid, then the next part of the trick has a really bad foundation to be built off on, and the chances of your success to actually get a clean swap and then get a clean juggle to spike, it's not gonna be that high. So you wanna make sure you have the swap motion down. I've seen players be able to do 1.5 juggle to spike and they can't do 1.5 swap spike. You don't really need to, you just wanna make sure you can just swap to a cup. Count 1.5 and then lob the tom up. And so for doing this, I recommend just splitting the 1.5 rotation of the Ken and the swap of the ball into 2 separate movements. It's like step 1, 1.5, you count the 1.5, and then you lob the ball up ever so slightly from the bottom. Below the Ken, you want to swap it. So notice how I'm swapping from below and then going to pick up like this. What I like to do to set up for 1.5 juggle spike is just swap it off to give it a little half earth turn, kind of like I'm just doing a 1.5 swap to spike like so, having that same level of drop. But instead of spiking it, I'm actually catching the ball kind of right after it gets down to this point where the pole's fully facing the ground. I'm actually cushioning it with my hand right as it kind of rotates a little forward from that angle. So my aim is to do a perfect earth turn from the bottom position to make it as simple as possible. And some people, instead of swapping it like that, they like to finger roll it to where it rolls on the side and it juggles the spike, comes down like a half earth turn from here. Find what works best for you. Once you figure out a method that feels most comfortable for you, stick with that, don't look back, and trust yourself when the time comes. Stilt, trade spike. You could do it like that. I think that's a lot harder and it feels a little more awkward. There is less string variability there in my opinion, but if you're really doing this right, then you're not gonna have to worry about the string much at all. So really after the stilt, it's just 2 movements. The switch from the Ken, and then the swap spike when you actually finish the move out. So for the half flip, you wanna just flip it and then give yourself a millisecond of time before it reaches that full half flip, before it's fully straight up. Give yourself a millisecond of time, maybe if the angle's like this, to actually transition to the Ken so you can catch it cleanly when it's fully straight up. The spike, set yourself up for greatness there. Once you got that clean catch down, where you're catching it when it's straight up, then move on to the swap spike part. And that one's just gonna be similar to a 1.5 trade spike, or even just the entry that we just talked about on the 1.5 juggle spike, how I get into that. So notice how the Tama first starts below the Ken, and then toss it up. Giving yourself room and space to actually, you know, separate the two and then throw the ball up makes for a way cleaner swap, and then you can actually transfer this to cleaner juggles and swaps out of different tricks in the future. All right, lightning drop, one turn in. So first and foremost, a lot of players watching are looking at this trick thinking, oh my gosh, it's so hard because I'm using a longer string and I don't do spacewalks because I play a long string and spacewalks are hard because of that. And for this, I recommend to gain proficiency on this actual trick to make a dedicated spacewalk setup. Make a setup that's 4 to 5 fingers long right down here, and dedicate that setup to doing all your spacewalk tricks on it. And the reason I recommend this is because if you can't do lightning drop one turn in consistently on a shorter string setup, then doing it on stage with a longer string, the setup that you're going to compete with, is going to be much, much harder. So practice on a 4 to 5 finger string length setup first. For the throw, focus on speed over height. This is an optimal throw for me. Some players really just go up and over like this and you know, throw it high and slow. And that's just a recipe for disaster. When you throw it high, it's hard to get a one turn to come around at the end, and it's less controlled. So focus on speed. As you can see, I'm really just throwing it right in front of my face here, and that should set you up. I'm not whipping it, you know, I'm not whipping it around, but it's faster than lightly tossing, and you're gonna find that perfect speed and height ratio on your own the more you practice. You can hold it in two ways, the string facing you and the string not facing you. I recommend learning this trick with a string facing you like this because it's only going to transfer on to more spacewalk tricks in the future because the big cup is going to be facing up. So when you're going to tricks like trade stalls, spacewalk to lunar, the big cup is going to be facing up instead of the small cup. For the catch, I'm not catching it all 5 fingers splayed out. You know, every finger gets a piece of the action and then catching it like this because my hole when I come up is not ready in that airplane grip. I prefer to catch it in more of an arc, a C motion like this. I'm coming around with it, I'm following it, catching it right here, bringing it up and doing a one turn. What this allows me to do is actually throw it, and right as I pull it up, it's already in that airplane grip. I'm already in the same grip that I usually do airplanes, stilts, just jumping sticks from. It makes it a lot more natural for me and a lot easier. When I catch it like this, I don't have to think about manipulating the position of the Tama hole. It's already there for me. Finally, for the one turn, you're gonna notice as I come down like that, the wrist does a little dip. That dip of the wrist is really the final piece after the speed portion of the spacewalk to get that Ken to do a one turn. Once you can do lightning drop, one turn in, 4 out of 10 times on a shorter string setup, move on to a longer string and start practicing. All right, airplane, 1.5, jug, down spike. For this one, guys, I actually don't care about Tama control. What I mean by that is I'm not paying any detail, any mind to how am I going to get this Tama to spin around perfectly for the perfect down spike. Because the reality is you can down spike at so many optimal angles. If you take a look at it, I'm down spiking from here. There's all spike positions in the northern hemisphere of the Tama, you know, just like literally everywhere. And it's way easier to save from different positions. Whereas juggle spike, I mean, this is so much awkward, right? Like you don't want to have a top to juggle spike from this angle. Whereas down spike is just like, whoop, you're just in there, you know? So I don't care about finding that perfect Tama control for a down spike. Tama control goes out the window for me. What I do like to do is a spin. So from the 1.5 jug to spike regular, I pay attention, I do a half drop, and then I lob it up to it for a perfect earth turn. But for this one, I roll it, it stays in that same position, I lob it up, and I'm there for a down spike, and the whole position doesn't really change. It usually just stays in this kind of area for me all the time. That's just how I prefer to do it. I prefer to do that because it transfers to different tricks. 1.5 jug in, you know, 1.5 jug stilt, all these things later on that make it a lot easier for me to, you know, throw into combos later. To get the actual juggle to down spike rotation, some people have trouble actually catching that down spike grip. I kind of catch it like a pencil, kind of catch it with my whole hand like this, like on the cups, like so, and just wait a millisecond longer than you usually would for a juggle to spike. It's gonna be a little, yeah, it's gonna feel a little weird at first. Just wait a millisecond longer, and I promise you that Ken's gonna do a little half rotation. Record yourself doing this. If you're just guessing, you're like, I might have been flipping too slow, I might have been flipping too fast, you can solve that really quickly if you just take the time to set yourself up on the camera, record yourself, watch it back after a couple attempts, and then you can make adjustments from there. All right, scooping goldfish, transfer and lunar, in all in one motion. Going full POV on this one, you're gonna wanna make sure you have scooping goldfish down. It doesn't take that much effort to learn. It's the easiest out of all the scooping goldfish tricks. As you can see my stance, I'm taking kind of a wider stance. I'm giving myself more room on the left side because I'm right-handed, I'm going to the left to come through and follow through on a scooping goldfish. When I do a scooping goldfish Genuine Lunar, the only thing that's different is how far I turn my wrist. So for the scooping goldfish Genuine Lunar, as you can see, I end position usually right here or a little before. And you're gonna wanna make sure you do this move with good speed because this is gonna allow you to have that time at the top for the Ken to kind of float, have a little hang time for you to actually make that transition to the ball to land it on Inward Lunar. If you have good speed, you're gonna be chilling at the top of the movement, and it's gonna be actually a little easier to get down than it might look. I'm not holding the Ken when I do a scooping goldfish up here. I'm holding it more nimbly right down here. So one more time, wide stance, transfer, boom, we're good. Two-turn lighthouse, trade Nightingale, inward flip in. So for this, guys, I'll go over once again just the technique for the pull-up. I'm right-handed, I play a right-handed kendama. I'm gonna hold it with the small cup facing up towards me. As I let go, I'm following that small cup, and once it reaches 180 degrees, only then do I give it a little tug of the wrist and pull up for a clean, straight two-turn to lighthouse. And so for the trade outer bird, you really want to use your knees on this. The control you're gonna have for this move is much higher than if you're just doing a trade spike. So really focus on having that tomahole come down just like a half earth turn. Not to the side, not to the left, not to the right, but just straight down like you were doing a perfect 1.5 swap spike. When I do the trade, I catch the Ken high up to where my fingers are up against the lower part of the cups. My index, middle, ring, and pinky finger are all touching each other. It's jammed up there under the small cup, and also my thumb is right under the big cup as well, giving me that sturdy base of a grip that I'm gonna need to catch this bird. And remember, when you trade spike, you're gonna catch this at a little more of an angle this time. You're gonna slightly point the spike towards you and make sure you have a good catch on that outer bird. Finally, what I like to do sometimes, this might help you guys, to have as much control as I think I possibly can have. I like to connect my pinky finger. It's usually off doing nothing, not touching the finger, not touching the tama. I usually like to connect the pinky finger to the tama. I move my ring finger a little bit up, and then I touch the bottom part of the tama with my pinky finger to give myself every last bit of reassurance that I have control over the tama to make a clean trade to bird at the end. Candlestick, dart to airplane. First up, I recommend thinking of this trick as not a dart, but a fast hand. A dart usually implies that the Ken leaves the hand before making contact with the tama. So if I spike that, I just threw it up in midair and spiked itself. That would be a dart. For this one, technically, you're not exactly transferring spike into the hole before you make that transition from the, grabbing the Ken to the tama. But the difference is so subtle that I really just think thinking of this as a fast hand makes it a lot easier to understand than a dart, where most people might be just trying to throw it, candlestick grip, to the hole. Thinking of it as a fast hand helps me, so I hope it helps you too. My first tip is the tama hole placement. So I really like to pull up the tama and have the hole in the direction facing me, not super low like this, but just facing me in sort of this hemisphere right here. I really like this because as I come up, even if it moves, it's only gonna move a little bit inward and still be in a perfect place for me to get a good attempt off at this trick. So my second tip, and this is the one that helped me the most, is actually once I go for the fast hand, in the middle of me tossing the ball up, and in this period before I actually make the attempt to go for the fast hand, I like to move my index finger, my middle finger, my thumb a little further down on the spike. So I'll start up holding the candle like this, where you can see my index fingers touching the cups and my thumb's touching the cups as well. But I'll actually move it down just a little bit like this. And for whatever reason, this gives me a better success rate on the trick. And that alludes me to my third tip, setup optimization. If you want to optimize your setup for this, I recommend using a longer spike. This one's a short spike. There's not much room to go much further down. And so because of that, I find my success rate on this kendama alone is worse than yesterday when I was doing it on a regular spike length kendama. As I said, guys, this trick is gonna be one of the hardest in the list. So make sure you put a lot of reps in on it. You're gonna wanna be that person, that player who has this down, who's confident they can get it at least once in 3 tries. Because trust me, if you have it down, it's very unlikely that your opponent's gonna be going back to back to back with you. This is a trick you're gonna wanna have to get a point on somebody.